Folks will start popping in. All right, so we've got 7 people, 10 people have joined in so far. And we'll open up the chat here just so people can type. Hello. And people will be joining in for the next couple minutes. So if you're just joining us, we're going to get started in a couple minutes. And we're going to give a couple more minutes for folks to join in. In the last 10 seconds, we've had about 20 people join, and it's still going up. So going to give it a couple more minutes before we get started here. And to get started maybe, or pre-start, maybe we'll get started with how's everybody doing in lockdown on quarantine? Zuhayeer and Zaheer, how are you all holding up?
I'm doing well, holding up, trying not to go crazy, trying to, yeah, not much. It's kind of boring, to be honest.
Yeah, something I've been trying to do actually with my little brother is we've been kind of biking around the neighborhood, but I mean, 2 days ago I actually got into a bike accident, which explains like this bruise on my face. But
oh no,
but that's why I've been extra locked down, and now I can't even go outside. So
yeah, you venture outside and the world kind of like hits you and says, "Get back in there."
Yeah.
Oh man, I moved in to this apartment 3 days before lockdown started, and I don't have any of my furniture. I just have a mattress when I moved in. So it was a mattress and my laptop were like the only 2 things I had to pass the time with.
Oh my God.
I ordered a standing desk and it finally came in about 3 or 4 weeks into quarantine. So now I can at least stand up.
Solid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
I think
like,
Zaheer moved in pretty recently too.
Yeah, I got married recently, and then I moved in like right before quarantine started. And so like all of our shopping has just been like over the internet, and it's just been like, oh yeah, I think this will look nice with everything else. But yeah.
oh, congrats. I didn't know you'd gotten married recently.
Yeah, thanks.
Wow. And then you're getting the marriage tested.
I know, right? We're just like together the whole time, all the time.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's fun. Well, we've got some folks joining us. Kind of a fun thing we like to do to kick off one of these events is everybody in the chat. Hello, aloha, Christian. We've got Sajin also said hi. I think we're all doing pretty well. We're grateful to be here with you all. Would love to hear where people are calling in from. You can just pop it into the chat. I'm calling in from Oakland. Normally we'd be doing this from our office in SF. Oh, we got someone from Nepal. Holy cow.
Wow. Texas, Chicago, Ottawa,
Boston, Mexico City. All right, we got some international folks in the house. Canada. Hey, hello. Oh, Richie.
A lot of LA.
Yeah, a lot of LA actually. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
LA's representing.
Yeah.
All right. And Zaheer, where are you calling in from? Zuhayeer, where are you calling in from?
Yeah, so I'm in Cupertino in South Bay, in the Bay Area. Yeah.
And I'm in Santa Clara, also in the Bay Area, South Bay.
Okay. So for those of you who aren't familiar with California geography, Zuhayeer is where it says your iPhone's made on the back of the iPhone.
That's right.
Or designed in Cupertino.
Yeah, right.
Designed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, really glad to be here, really excited to be here with the founders, the co-founders of Levels.fyi. We're going to get started real quick with a quick introduction of who I am. My name's Dan, one of the co-founders here at Outco. Outco, we do a career accelerator for software engineers, basically helping fittingly software engineers level up. And that's part of the reason this session here is so exciting for us and such a good fit, because it's such a cohesive fit we have here with Levels.fyi. So yeah, real quick for a little bit of additional information about Outco, you can find us, I'll pop it into the chat here. You can find us at outco.io. You can also see some of our reviews from what we do. It's a 4-week program to help you level up in your CS fundamentals so that you can stretch to that next level that Zuhayeer and Zaheer will be talking about here in a couple minutes, both on the technical side and the interpersonal skills side. So confidence, communication, competence in terms of your, again, CS fundamentals, and things of that nature. But don't want to get too much into that. Want to have as much time here for Zaheer and Zuhayeer. So without further ado, perhaps we could get started with telling us a little bit about yourselves individually, and then maybe we'll get into a little bit about how you met and started Levels.fyi.
Yeah, sounds good. I can start. My name is Zaheer. I've been in the industry for about 6-ish years. I went to school in LA. Actually, I see a lot of LA people on the chat. So I went to UC Irvine, and I graduated, and then right out of college, I joined LinkedIn. I had an intern there actually during college, and then I got accepted for a full-time at LinkedIn. I worked there for about 2 years, and then I moved on to Amazon, where I was working within Amazon Web Services, AWS. And I was there for about 3 years. I had gotten promoted there as a senior engineer. And yeah, and then right after late last year is when I actually left Amazon to go full time on Levels. Levels has actually been around for about 3 years, but it was just towards the end of last year where we started seeing it take off, and we decided to go full time. And that's my background.
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Zuhayeer. And in a lot of ways, I'm kind of the antithesis to Zaheer because I've been through, I guess, a lot more startups and not as many big companies. But I graduated from Berkeley in 2018 and kind of went into a startup right away with a few friends. And the idea being kind of like treating Airbnbs as like a showroom where you can kind of purchase things that you like, or like furniture items that you might have, experienced or seen in the Airbnb and kind of purchased it later. And around the same time, actually, we were still working on Levels.fyi. It was kind of like a side project, as Zaheer mentioned, for like the past 3 years. But around that time, things started picking up, and I decided to go full time around like a year ago. I want to say like around a year ago, I went full time, and so it's been around a year of me working full time on Levels.fyi, and then Zaheer joined me, and then now we're kind of all both working on it together. Yeah.
All right, exciting stuff. And I forgot to mention just real quick, Zuhayeer and I will be talking for probably the next 25 minutes or so. Hopefully talking about things that everyone here finds relevant. And then we'll open it up to Q&A. If you have any questions, just pop them into the Q&A. There's a little Q&A button, I believe, at the bottom of your screen there. Just pop that open and ask any question you might have for Zuhayeer or Zaheer, and we'll work on addressing those for the second part of this, approximately the second part of this this session here. So Zuhayeer, thank you for the introduction there. Maybe a good next step would be just walking us through the product, just at a high level. What is Levels.fyi, and then sort of an actual walkthrough, if you would.
Yeah. Maybe we can start with a little bit, or like step back and just kind of describe Levels.fyi a little bit. So Levels.fyi is kind of like a tool to help you kind of find or a tool to help you map different career levels across different companies. And at its core, that's sort of what we do. We kind of help you map exactly where you should be going for your next career step, as well as, gauge compensation and, different kind of information when joining a new company, and finding kind of all these things in kind of one place. And we also and we also kind of want to make it easy for kind of job seekers to just find like the scopes and responsibilities at different levels, and kind of figure out exactly where they fall into and find where they should be going next. Zaheer, if you want to explain a little bit
No, I
more?
think that that covers it. I mean, our mission is basically to help people make better career decisions, and our goal is to make it easy for you to figure out how much you should be paid, and how what career and all the information you need to make better career decisions. That's kind of it. And you want to give a site walkthrough, I guess?
Yeah. So I can share my screen here. Let's see if it works. Cool. Everyone can see.
Yep.
Got it.
Levels.fyi pulled up. All right, awesome. Yeah. So this is kind of like our homepage where you come into our site and you notice some of the recent salary submissions that we have, as well as some of these companies that we have like the leveling tiles for. And before we go into, I guess, the exact leveling across these different companies, kind of wanted to explain a little bit about what a career ladder is and how we kind of represent it. I think the levels that we kind of show on our site kind of codify the hierarchy, scope, and responsibility of each level, and the visual kind of tries to answer the question, if I was an employee at Google, say an L3, where could I be going to if I were to transfer to another company? And we try to answer that question, and the visual is meant to be kind of like a guide for that, as well as helping you kind of understand what the expectations of that role could be. So we do have like this standard leveling guide here for people to kind of just understand a little bit of an overview of what each role might entail. So I can go ahead and click here and see, okay, so entry-level software engineer develops and maintains low to moderately complex components, working on a team, typically receives guidance and support from more experienced team members. And as we go up here, we see that you start to own more and more, develop and own moderate to complex components, possibly lead a small team or project, ability to mentor engineers, provide technical guidance, code reviews, design, and deliver on small projects end to end. And impact is typically at the immediate team scope. This is typically considered a career level. And actually, that's an important point. Just because there are many levels doesn't mean that like you're guaranteed to be, going through every single one. You could be stuck around at a level, and if you choose to be, that it could be whatever. Like if you have that's your kind of prerogative, and you can also choose to, and you could still actually get compensation increases within a level without having to kind of go to another level. Yeah, that's an interesting point. But I do want to kind of just show you guys that there is the standard that we have, and you can kind of go through it on our site. I won't go through all the levels, but feel free to mess around with it. But we do have kind of, all these levels at different companies available, like you can remove the standard now, Amazon, Apple as well. And you can kind of see the rough relationship that we have across all of these levels. And so if I click on one, I can sort of get a compensation overview of what that level entails, at least, and this is kind of our estimate that we give you. If you want to, for example, filter by location, you can also go here and kind of into the top right corner and select a specific kind of locale. I don't think Apple, we don't have many locations for Apple, but let's say Amazon, right? They have a really big Seattle presence. So if I look at Seattle, for example, I can get the actual, compensation details for Seattle. Yeah, and then, and if you want to revert back, you can always go to all regions and kind of see the rough overview across all locations. So speaking of Amazon, why don't we kind of go into, like, if you click here and click on this button, you can go into a company overview, and here you can view a little bit more about the company. And this is something we actually recently launched, so we're really excited to kind of share it here on the Outco podcast. We kind of show some of the top insights at specific companies. Like, for example, Amazon is known for a backloaded vesting schedule, which I'll get into in a second. They also typically offer 2 years of signing bonuses, as well as being a top paying company from last year as per our report, as well as, you know, a few other things that you can view, kind of get an overview of the stock, the headquarters, and so on and so forth. If I click on the salaries page here, I can get a view of the vesting schedule at the bottom. And this is kind of important for Amazon just because they have a funky schedule. You will notice that you get 5% in year one, 15% year two, 40% in the latter 2 years. And that's sort of how Amazon's vesting program works. And it's good to know, just like, you know, make sure that you know how long the vesting schedule is and how much percentage you're getting each year, because that affects like basically your overall compensation for, you know, your 4 years that that the stock grant might be for. And, you know, some companies aren't even 4 years, like Palantir might be 5 years. And Microsoft has like interchangeable like offers that we've noticed where they do 4 or 5 years. And then some companies like Electronic Arts does 3 years for their vesting. So it's good to kind of just know. And if you click into like some of these, you know, like titles, you can actually get some comprehensive charts and information on the compensation or on the levels at the company. Yeah, and we think this could be really helpful for people, you know, just negotiating. And if you just want to know the pay ranges, these charts are pretty helpful to kind of just look through. And one other thing we added recently as well is kind of benefits information. And I'm just skipping over to Google here, but you know, we kind of summarize some of the benefits that you can get at different companies, and, you know, even give you some of the unique benefits. So for example, like Google, unique benefit is egg freezing. And we want to just make sure, you know, people have this complete information, because a lot of the times, like a lot of these benefits can add up into a lot of kind of monetary value. And for you to make a holistic decision, you should know like what perks you'll be getting. And just one more quick kind of thing I wanted to walk through is our kind of location pages. I think location is probably one of the biggest macro factors for compensation overall. And so we want to make sure, like, you know, you can get information on different kind of metropolitan areas. I know we don't have like a super comprehensive list right now, but let's say we want to go into Seattle. You can see the median kind of package and the breakdown for it, as well as some of the top paying companies in this region. And then you can also see just like where companies are bucketed more or less, or where compensation is bucketed across this kind of spectrum. And you can also view some of the specific details right below in this table. You can kind of see exactly like, you know, what these data points have. Like years of experience, and kind of even search through it if you want. Like, for example, if I only wanted to see distributed systems, I can get that. So these are all the distributed system salaries. I can even go and say, I just want to see mid-level distributed system salaries, and you'd get that as well. So that's just like a useful tool as well. And this final page that I want to share with everyone is kind of our Who's Still Hiring page, which we've kind of done as a response to the whole COVID-19 situation. And we essentially kind of aggregate all the companies that are hiring right now, and kind of split it down by role so that you can kind of apply really easily. And we do have like kind of a search bar. You can search by different locations and a few other, and a role filter as well. So if I'm a data scientist, I can look at the data scientists, the companies that are hiring data scientists right now. And if you want to view it alphabetically, you can click on this. Actually, our map is actually really interesting. You can kind of just see all the companies hiring across the world in this nice view. You know, if I zoom it in on New York, for example, let's see, you can kind of see like all these companies, by kind of like their actual address. And if I click, for example, on Venmo, you can just get to applying right away, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's sort of overview of our site. I know that was kind of long, but hopefully didn't bore people to death. But
Oh, you've got so much packed in there, so much that you offer people. It's understandable. It takes a little bit to, and that felt like still you could have probably gone even longer if you wanted to. So that's really great. And
yeah, let me
the yeah, go
let
ahead.
me hop back in. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, with having worked with 1,700 job-seeking software engineers, lots and lots of people, engineers are asking questions that you're answering in a very beautiful, elegant fashion that, frankly, we couldn't answer in as comprehensive and easily understandable and valuable way that you all are doing. So really appreciate what you're doing there. For anybody who's just joined, to get a couple people ask, is this live? Yes, we are live. We're really here right now. And we're going to be taking Q&A answers here in about 10-ish minutes. So if you have any questions, pop them into the Q&A. That's different than the chat. If you could pop them into the Q&A, it's easier for us to organize on this end. That'd be appreciated. And just out of curiosity, I'm going to launch a poll right now to see how many folks here are actually currently job seeking. Are you currently on the job search? Maybe not. Maybe you're considering it. Maybe it's just a matter of time until you're actually there. But you can see 36 people here are actively job seeking. 60% of the attendees, at least respondents, are actively job seeking. So vast majority, this is really, really relevant material here. So really glad to see that everyone here is at least getting relevant info. And for the 6 of you, hopefully it will be valuable some point in the near future. Thank you all for answering that. I guess to segue with the poll there, how do you recommend job-seeking software engineers use your website to the best to leverage to the highest value for making the next move that they might be making?
Yeah, I think in terms of most immediate thing, obviously the first most important thing would be the list of companies that are still hiring. Definitely take a look at that, figure out the companies that are still hiring. Just by the list, you can also get a sense of which industries are hiring the most, and use that to your advantage to figure out which other companies might be hiring that we don't even have on the list. I think on the main tool though, the biggest thing that we can offer is to help you determine how much you should be paid. And even though we are in like a crisis mode, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be negotiating right now. It is still a good time to negotiate. It is still valuable to negotiate, and you can still actually increase your offer by negotiating. As an example, I have a friend that was applying to Facebook and was able to negotiate almost 30K more. And this is just within the last week on his offer by using some of the data on our site. How do you use that data? Once you get an offer or once you're evaluating an offer, take a look at the pay of either that company or similar companies on our site, and you can see the pay. We always show the pay range, and so you can get a good idea of how much you could be paid. Based on that pay range, you'll know whether you have room to negotiate and how much room you have. And you can use that you can use that in your conversations with the recruiters to actually negotiate. And there's different strategies. I won't get into too much detail right now, but there is a lot of room to negotiate, and it is still a good time to negotiate. I want to make sure that folks know that you can still negotiate even right now during this crisis mode situation that we have going on.
Nice, thank you, Zaheer. Zuhayeer, anything to add?
No, I mean, I think Zaheer covered it. I think, yeah, like he mentioned at the beginning, like if you look to our who's still hiring page and you kind of take note of the industries that are still hiring, I think some of the companies that will weather this storm and do even really, really well over the next few years are probably having a hard time hiring right now, potentially. So you want to find those opportunities now and kind of look for those kind of companies that could be very promising.
Have you all been seeing anything? I mean, you've got this amazing resource. By the way, putting that page together and having that detail that you have there is really impressive and a great service. So thank you for putting that together for for everybody. Do you have any like feelers out there? Do you have a sense for the market? Are companies still hiring? I mean, we've certainly still been seeing companies hiring, but I'd be curious to hear your take on where things are right now with COVID and sort of the job market.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's pretty brutal still, where there are a ton of companies that have been doing layoffs and hiring freezes. And I would say, majority of companies, especially, I think majority of companies are being more cautious right now. And so even if they are still hiring, they have probably slowed hiring. That said, there are exceptions to this. And so companies that are doing well in this sort of time, like, obviously Zoom, which is doing great because everyone's going virtual, or Amazon, because everyone's shopping online these days, are doing, much better and are hiring even more than they would, than typical times. But that said, I do want to paint a realistic picture that most companies, or a lot of companies, are freezing hiring and or slowing down hiring. But that doesn't mean that that shouldn't deter you. I think there is a lot of hope that there are a ton of companies that are still hiring, and even from the ones that have slowed down hiring, there is it is still an opportunity for you to. This is a good time where you could distinguish yourself in terms of applying and making yourself really look good when applying. So I do think that yes, companies are slowing down hiring, but there's still opportunity out there to be hired.
Yeah, and I think especially for I think you mentioned at some point, like, for mid-level to senior level engineers, it's actually not as bad because you kind of have the experience kind of necessary. For new grads, it is a little tougher, but as Zaheer mentioned, there's still like a lot of opportunity out there, and there are companies that are going to be even better off like now because of like these like kind of world changes that are going to happen. And so I think just kind of being able to identify that and trying to find those opportunities once again is really important. And I think more importantly, it's like just staying kind of like vigilant and strong through like a recruiting process is probably hard, but usually as long as you kind of keep at it, you land right where you need to be. So it's a matter of persistence in a sense as well. So good luck to everyone out there who's recruiting right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a scary time. There's gems though. You just saw, for example, Airbnb's CEO tweeting, "Hey, we just had to lay off. I think it was 25% of their workforce." And said, here's the list of folks we just had to lay off. If anybody is interested in hiring them, please get in touch with us. And they had 250,000 inquiries for the people that they laid off. So clearly a lot of opportunities still out there. But I think as we're all seeing, at the minimum, you have to be much more scrappy. And as Zuhair, I think, was alluding to, you got to kind of push through it. And for all the folks who are currently job seeking, which is about 60% of the folks here right now, curious to hear, how do you discover do you have any insight into how you can gauge like what the maximum level, what the upper bound of your potential is to get into a company? And you can reference your product there at Levels.fyi, but maybe if you have any insight into sort of like the differences between like junior, senior type of responsibilities, skill sets, and how you're sort of pushing through a threshold would be helpful.
Yeah. So at the most, if most entry-level candidates, or if you're a new software engineer, you will be falling at the first level of most of the companies. And so on our main page, you'll see the graph of the levels at the different companies. And the first level is primarily the level which, all you're expected to do is sort of execute on a task or assignment. There isn't much else that you're expected to do. It's, you will get a task or assignment at a company, and they'll expect you to complete it within, the proper amount of time. As you move up, you're looking at sort of two scopes of competence which increase, particularly the technical competence as well as leadership competence. And so on the technical competence side, when you get to the second level, is when you're expected to sort of own a project or own a feature, own something, moderately complex and deliver on that. And as you go up, so let's say you get to the third level, now you're expected to own a major system perhaps, or designing a system and leading a project which is comprised of multiple components. And so, no matter where you are in your career, you can take a look at those ladders and, roughly the first level is always going to correspond to the entry level engineer, which is just sort of delivering on some small feature. A second level is going to be someone that's a little bit more senior that has maybe 1 to 3-ish, maybe 5 years of experience and can do things autonomously, can deliver on a feature or a small project autonomously without too much help. And then at the third level is when you start to see, someone that's more so of a leadership competence where they're able to lead a team as well as, maybe design a project, design a system, or design something that requires multiple components to be delivered. And so that's kind of a rough guide if you're trying to figure out where I should enter a company at. And something that's important even in this time is you want to make sure that when you're entering a company, you're entering at the right level. And using, basically what I've just described, as well as the guide that we have on our website, the leveling rubrics that we have, you can kind of figure out where you should be placed. Now, if you are a new grad, again, keep in mind there isn't too much wiggle room. But as you have more experience, there's a bit more wiggle room into which level you get placed at, and you want to keep pushing the boundary you want to make sure that you're getting the highest level possible, but it's also within your comfort zone of what you think you'll actually be able to deliver on in terms of project. You don't want to, bite off more than you can chew, so to speak.
Right. And I think it just becomes a little bit confusing because, there are companies like Microsoft where you have, a lot of kind of levels, and it's kind of hard to place yourself, if you've been working at Google, it's kind of hard to place yourself in a specific level. And I think that's where our site comes in and kind of helps you understand what level you should be placed at. But also kind of, you can kind of, there's the opposite extreme as well, where there are companies like Netflix where you need to know exactly like what you're doing when you kind of like apply to Netflix or go there. You have to know that, okay, you have to have this level of competence and like go in. For those who aren't familiar with kind of Netflix's situation, they only have kind of one career level across their company. It's kind of like a flat structure, but they're all kind of treated as senior software engineers. Versus like Microsoft, I don't even know how many levels they have. There's like a lot of kind of breakdown. And so I think just understanding where you should be placed, because you don't, like, as Zaheer mentioned, you don't want to kind of go in at a high level because that's not your end goal. Your end goal is to thrive at that level once you're at the company. And so if you are placed in the right level, you can really prove yourself and actually have like, really meaningful career growth versus, getting in at a very high level in the beginning could be kind of detrimental to your career because you might not be able to perform at that level and realize that like, oh, I actually wasn't supposed to be at this level. So I think like there is kind of like a balance. You do want to push the boundaries, but at the same time, make sure that you're able to deliver.
Nice. Yeah. All about the balance between reality and your dreams, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess one last question that came up there for me was, what do you do if the company I'm interviewing at isn't on Levels.fyi? Is the tool still useful for me?
Yeah, at that point, I think it's still useful to look at the standard that we have published. The standard is like a generic leveling scheme across all companies. And so, across most companies, they'll be called software engineer. The second level is typically called senior engineer. Third level could be called staff engineer. Eventually, either the third or fourth level will be like a principal engineer. So that's kind of like a rough guide you can get. And you can look at those roles and responsibilities, and you can also look at the job description. Typically, the job description will kind of hint at what level you'll be joining in at. If you see things about leading a team or leading a small project, that it's probably falling at a level 2+ at the second level or third level. If you see things about it's simply you're expected to develop a project. If you don't see any leadership sort of traits in the job role, then you can kind of assume that it's mostly going to be just the first level of an engineering. And so based on the common sort of traits, I think you can still figure out which level you're entering, even if we don't have that company on our site. Again, the standard is the place you want to look on our site, where the standard will, if you click on the standard, it'll tell you what are the roles and responsibilities of each level as you go up the track.
Right. Yeah. And I think, I mean, you could still get an idea for kind of compensation information. If we have, so I think if we have more than 3 data points at a company, we still kind of reveal the data points in our comp page. So if you go to our compensation page, you can search for that company. And if we have any information, you can view kind of compensation information there. And if you do know anyone that knows, you know, that has some information on leveling that we don't currently have, we'd also appreciate any contributions. We have like this leveling creation tool that helps us kind of publish a lot of these levels for these companies. And I can put that link in the chat as well.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna switch over to Q&A now. So again, everyone here attending, feel free to pop in any questions you have in the Q&A. We're gonna bombard Zaheer and Zuhayeer here with as many as we can squeeze out of their brain in the next half hour. So I guess, and a question that occurred to me as well is how are you getting all this data? Like this is amazing, rich data you have. Where's it all coming from?
Yeah, it's all of our data is actually crowdsourced, and so it's similar to. I see another question actually in the Q&A. How is this different than Glassdoor? You know, Glassdoor as well has crowdsourced data. I think the place where we differentiate from Glassdoor or any other site that aggregates salary information is that we have verified data. And so we actually ask some users, or we ask users to actually submit their W-2 statements or their offer letters. And based on those things, we're able to actually, based on the W-2 statement or the offer letter, we're actually able to get a verified salary or a verified data point. And using the verified, most of our data points now, most people don't actually submit W-2 statements or offer letters. They might not be comfortable doing that. And so they'll just submit it, you know, on our regular form. But using our verified data points, we're actually able to filter out and verify the rest of our data set because we kind of set those verified data points as anchors. And when we look at the rest of our data, we're able to say, okay, this looks off based on, you know, the few verified data points that we have. And so again, it's all crowdsourced, and we actually encourage everyone here that's on the call to actually submit your information once you get an offer. And things that's really the only way that we're able to grow, and that's, you know, the more that people contribute to the platform, the more benefit everyone gets from the platform, and the more people that contribute, the more everyone else is also encouraged to contribute. So we do encourage everyone to really please contribute your information when you get the chance or when you get the offer.
Yeah, and also just to tag on kind of a little extra information on how we're different from kind of Glassdoor is that we also have like the leveling information, and we kind of make it a point to kind of, you know, ensure that the leveling information is correct, and make sure that we kind of can map it to some level at the company. Whereas I think like some of the salaries could get conflated by level in Glassdoor and could kind of, you know, throw off some of the ranges. And I think, you know, getting a good idea of this might be like our charts page, which I didn't really share, but like you can kind of see exactly the ranges at these different companies with, and we use kind of these statistical tools to make sure it's like, you know, only the one standard deviation between the average, and just show you like all of that information. And I can throw that link in the chat as well. But I think that's usually really helpful for people because, you know, people don't like looking at just one kind of static salary, because that doesn't really give you, you know, the wiggle room that you need to negotiate potentially. So seeing ranges is like a lot more helpful, because now you know, like, this is the high end of the band, this is the low end of the band, and where you might fall in between.
Nice, powerful. Yeah, and we teach our engineers the same thing. Give a range, and that way, you know, if their range has shifted or you're off somehow, odds are with a range, there's still going to be some overlap there. So there's benefit to both being able to see the range to gauge whether ideally the range you're giving is within reason.
Right.
Very nice. Another question we had, and I've only seen one or two more of these types of questions where it's more about like your product, the model, and that's actually exactly what it is what is the business model of Levels.fyi? How do you make money?
Great question. Right now we are, and I think parts of it we are still trying to figure out ourselves. Right now we are monetized through ads. So just many other companies, we have an ad on the homepage. So our sponsor is now it's TripleByte primarily. And so we have anyone it's a very simple like ad based model right now. But I think eventually we are looking at branching out and figuring out what other services that we can provide to help people that might be looking for a job. And those are things that we're actually imminently working on, and so look out for new things coming out soon.
Awesome, nice. And a couple other sort of product related questions. Do you have remote jobs? Obviously, that's a big question for everybody right now. Is there remote work out there? And then do the salaries differentiate on the platform for remote versus not remote? And do you see a difference in reality for remote jobs versus, I mean, everything's remote right now for the most part, but
yeah,
historically speaking.
Yeah, I think that we just actually recently started more kind of aggressively collecting remote salary information. And I think we're still in the collection process where we're trying to figure out the best way to kind of show this information and kind of display it on our site. But we do have some. I think if you go to our compensation page and search remote, you can view some of the remote salaries that we have right now. And if you go to our form, we just added this flag where you can flag different roles as remote, but still add your location so we can know what location you're working from. In the past, the way we had it was like you would just write remote, which didn't tell us where you were working from. It just told us that you were remote. But I think having some of the location information would be kind of interesting as well, where people are working remote from, for which companies, and that might tell you a little bit more about which companies are hiring, and from where, and where you could potentially be working from, and maybe satellite, and it might be indicative of satellite offices. And I think especially with I know Twitter recently just announced that work from home will be kind of a permanent thing. So I definitely think this will start to other companies will start to follow probably, and there will probably be a lot more kind of remote work lifestyles. And maybe we see headquarter kind of campuses downsizing, and satellite offices becoming more of a thing where you have way more presences across the US instead of this gigantic campus. And I mean that'll be really interesting because cost of living will go significantly down for people who are across working across the country. How does compensation look becomes the big question, and I think we're still trying to figure that out. And I think we'll see how companies kind of treat this as we go.
Okay. A big question I saw in here that I think is probably pretty important for you all is the question is, how do you submit data? Want to make sure people know how to do that to enrich the data set you all are working with. Maybe you want to share.
Yeah, we can pop the link in the in the chat. But if you're on the main page, there should be a button on the top that says add salary, and there should also be another button. Was a little bit more hidden, but when you're looking at when you're trying to choose a company, there's also a button to add leveling. But they're both on the main page.
Yeah, I just added the link. But yeah, so there are essentially two ways to kind of add information. Like Zaheer mentioned earlier, we have a way for you to upload your kind of information, and just want to clarify, we do take privacy and anonymity very seriously, and so we usually extract the details from an offer or W-2, and then completely remove it. And we and for the self-reported, it's completely like anonymous. We don't even like track who you are. We just collect this information in aggregate and kind of get like a lot of insight from the volume of data that we can get.
Yeah, fun fact, we don't have accounts on the site, so everything is available and accessible to you. Without an account, you don't have to sign in, sign up, or anything. Everything is just freely available for everyone.
Yeah.
James asked, how have recruiters, hiring managers responded to referencing Levels.fyi when negotiating compensation packages? Have you heard any stories of someone coming to you and say, you blew my whole negotiation because I referenced your site, or maybe the opposite, thank you so much, it's because of Levels I was able to buy this new Benz?
Yeah, quite the opposite, actually. I think I actually had a friend that was interviewing at Apple, and in the negotiation process, the recruiter mentioned some number, and my friend was like, hey, that seems like it's on the low end of the range for this level. And the recruiter was like, hey, how do you know what the salary range is? And he was like, oh yeah, I looked on Levels. I think the salary range, based on Levels, the salary range should be from X to Y. And the recruiter was like, wow, like, he was actually surprised and shocked. And my friend was actually able to negotiate, again, 30K more, based on, the conversations that he had and by knowing the actual level range. So I think, that's obviously an anecdotal story, but I think the transparency for job seekers has allowed them to negotiate more. And I don't know whether recruiters would respond. I'm sure obviously there is some tension amongst recruiters or from the hiring managers and having all of this data so freely and openly available. But at the same time, I think, again, our mission is to help job seekers, and that's where those are the people that we are trying to serve. And that's why we have all of this information sort of so open and easily accessible.
Yeah, I love that story. It's it's one of our favorites for sure. But I also think like, I think it's been a net benefit for hiring managers as well, in the sense that like the ones that we've reached out to have also mentioned like, yeah, we look at our company and look at our salary information on there. And the reason we reached out was because the information for our company is accurate, we figured that your other information is probably accurate too. So we kind of want to look at this as a competitive angle too. Like you can kind of see like what other companies are paying, and it's been helpful for them in that sense, interestingly enough.
Oh, and one thing actually to add here, and I didn't mention it during when we answered about our business model, but one other actually thing that we do for revenue is we actually sell access to our normalized data set. And so all of the data that we have, we will actually put it in like a convenient access form. We'll normalize the data, clean it out, and sell it to actually compensation analysts at companies. So compensation analysts are the people that are deciding how much to pay their employees at a company. And these people actually do research on how much are other companies paying. And they actually find our information very valuable. And we have tons of compensation analysts that have reached out to us asking about access to our data because they are trying to figure out how much they should pay their employees. And so, one, that's another revenue stream for us. But, when we think about how are companies in general responding to Levels, I think a lot of them, it's a two-faced kind of approach in some sense. The compensation analysts find it great because they have like a very accurate source, very accurate real-time source of salary data. Whereas on the hiring manager and the recruiter front, they may not like it so much because, it's kind of revealing their cards in some sense.
Right.
Very interesting. No better source of validation than companies coming to you and saying, we see you as accurate.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And maybe that'd be something you'd consider, putting like a success story little section on your website and talk about how I got 30K more at my job.
Yeah. That's actually, not a bad idea.
What do you have any information? Another question in the Q&A. Do you have any information about the interview process at particular companies, or any plans to do that? Sort of, I know that Glassdoor kind of gives you some broad hints, and sometimes people enter in questions. Any information there?
I think we're starting to go down that route with our again, as Zaheer mentioned, we just launched company pages this week, and so what that is for every company we have a page, a dedicated page, where we collected benefits, salaries, and I think the idea is to eventually expand that to include interview questions, interview process tips and tricks. You'll actually notice that on our Amazon company page, we actually do have an insight on the overview tab. And the insight is on how to interview and some tips for best preparing for the Amazon interview. And again, I was able to add that tip because I work there. But the idea is that now that we have this page available, we've made it very easy for anyone to contribute tips and information about interviews. And if you have an interview tip for a company, please do contribute on those pages, and we'll definitely add it to the site.
Nice. Okay. Thank you. Another question. Actually, a couple people have asked this question. Is there a difference? And I don't know if this is perhaps compensation, but also, if you happen to have any even anecdotal information on the differences between working remotely versus in the workplace. Of course, again, sort of excluding the present exceptional situation we're all in. Do you see any difference between remote work versus on-site work in terms of compensation, quality of life, those types of things? Quality of work.
I can't say that we've done like a vigorous enough analysis around it, to be honest. So I don't know whether we have that data, but just based on kind of the anecdotal data that I've looked at, there are differences definitely for remote compensation, where remote compensation will tend to be lower than if you're comparing it to, for example, like a Bay Area compensation. That said, there are notable exceptions. One exception to this, and this is not really specific to remote, but just location in general, Facebook pays the same rate across all locations. So no matter which location you are working at Facebook for, let's say I'm working as an engineer in Texas or Seattle or Bay Area, they will pay the same rate, and it's not location specific. So yeah, again, that's an exception rather than the rule. I think most companies will adjust pay by location. Now, that said, companies that are remote first typically tend to have a different philosophy than companies that have mostly on-site engineers or on-site employees with just a couple of remote folks. In the case where most employees are on-site and have a couple of remote folks, I think you will see where the remote compensation aligns with the majority employees' compensation, because they don't have a standardized sort of process for discriminating, I guess, against the remote employees. But the companies that are remote first, I think it was GitLab, or I forget which company I was looking at, but some companies have actually published, publicly their formula for calculating salaries. Buffer, I believe, one of them. GitLab, I think, is one of them. But they publish how they actually calculate your compensation publicly. And for some of these companies, one of the factors is location, cost of living adjustment. But again, it really varies by company.
Yeah, I think geography kind of holds these kind of chambers of kind of hidden information. Like, a lot of people may not know what Bay Area salaries look like if they're living outside of the Bay Area, and vice versa as well. Like, people don't know, what compensation looks like outside of the Bay Area if they're living in the Bay Area. And so I think that might start to get lifted, where, we'll start to question, like, okay, if I can work from anywhere, and, people will be treated like that. Okay, since you can work from anywhere, what should compensation look like for, hiring a software engineer? Maybe it's not dependent on location anymore, or as much, and it might have to just be normalized across, like, the fact that, your distributed team might be working from all over the country. I think it's an interesting thing to think about. I mean, I don't think we have the like complete answer to like that question. But I think we're really interested in trying to see like how that would look over the next like, few months, especially with like, companies taking the charge on remote. Um, um, I know like companies aren't like aggressively hiring right now, but when companies do start hiring, what do the compensation packages look like for that type of role?
Yeah, and there's actually a sort of a fitting follow-on question to that last point you were talking about there, Zuhair, in terms of like once the market does start to pick back up and resume normal hiring pace, do you all anticipate any change in salaries, or do you anticipate anything to be different than it was perhaps before COVID in terms of compensation, or maybe even are you seeing any trends at this time?
So far, we haven't actually seen any decrease in compensation as a result of COVID, which is, it's both, in some sense it's surprising, but also it might be early to tell. But based on the data that we've seen, we don't believe that companies have started to pay less because of, to take advantage of COVID or anything. We're seeing pay sort of continue at the same rate that it was before COVID. Now, what happens after COVID? To be honest, I'm not sure. I do think that software engineers are still in demand. It's still a hot skill. It's still it's still a very much competitive landscape, right? So I do think that will keep the bar of salaries high, especially for the top tech companies. Now, there was an article just yesterday, I believe, that in India, there is an oversupply of engineers. And, because of that, obviously salaries might be taking a hit and things like that. But, I think in the Bay Area, or at least in the US in particular, I don't think that we have that issue. And I think that software engineers are still very much in demand. Companies, every industry or every company will need software engineers. There's no industry that doesn't need sort of software engineers pretty much anymore, right? Every company, whether it's like agriculture, even agriculture is being, they have tech-enabled agriculture and things, right? Tech is sort of taken over the world, right? And so there is still a very much a need, and I think as long as there is that need and that demand, we will keep, we will continue to see salaries, remain being high, at least in the near term.
Okay. I guess we're coming up on the end here. We got about 4 minutes. We'll take one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. But don't worry, stick around for a couple more minutes. We're gonna do a couple more things here at the end. But curious, what's the typical difference between working at a new company or a startup, as it might be, versus a big company? Do you all see typical differences? And that can be anything from like your opportunity. If you're very junior, are big companies always hiring versus smaller companies? Compensation, I don't know if you have any anecdotal experience, especially maybe particularly between the two of you, working at startups versus big companies, and work, the quality of the work, quality of life, those types of things.
Yeah. So in terms of compensation, I think, obviously most smaller companies probably will not be able to pay the same rate as bigger companies. And so compensation will definitely take a hit at smaller companies. That said, if you're at a unicorn startup, Airbnb, Lyft, or whatever, any of these huge startups, they will pay a similar rate to many of the other mega tech companies like Apple, Amazon, Facebook, etc. In terms of opportunity, which I think is the most interesting aspect, people always wonder, like, if I start my career at a big company, am I better off than a startup, or vice versa even, right? And I think I really think it depends on the individual and the opportunities within the organization that you're given. So for example, if the startup that you're at grows quickly, if the startup that you're at grows quickly, then I think you are afforded opportunities to grow in your own career. And so instead of optimizing for big company versus small company, I would optimize more so for like growth in general. and growth being for specifically of the team that you will be joining, right? And so let's say I can join a big company that is growing very fast. So for example, I was at LinkedIn. When I joined LinkedIn, I was on the messaging team. The messaging team grew from 5 people to 50 people over the span of a year. Because of that, I was able to ride the wave of growth, and I got promoted at LinkedIn just naturally because I first, I had tribal knowledge of, the systems and the things, and I was able to grow. When I joined Amazon, I joined a new team, a new service, which grew from about 10 people to, again, close to almost 100 people. And I was able to benefit from that growth and ride the wave. And I think, and Zuhayeer can probably speak more to this, but I think if you're at any startup and, if that startup experiences the same amount of growth, if you are on top of things, if you are maintaining, if you are continuing to excel in your work, you will ride that wave. You will grow with the company as well. So again, I think the key here is optimize for growth, and specifically team growth if you're at a larger company. And if you're at a smaller company, they probably haven't shifted into many silos of teams, just general growth of the company.
Right. No, yeah, I agree 100% with Zaheer. And I think typically at a larger company, things are more mature, things have process, things have kind of definitions around like how you do certain things. At a startup, the difference is, I think a lot of those is what you get to set and you get to decide for the future of the company in a sense. Depending on how small the startup is, obviously as you start to go into hundreds to thousands of employees, it becomes pretty set as well. But I think what you want to optimize for, as Zaheer mentioned, is overall growth. So, like at a startup, that might mean like, just the product and what the core problem that your company is solving, and figuring out like if that has opportunity to grow beyond what it is today, and like how do you capture that growth, kind of, right? You as an engineer, kind of as Zaheer mentioned, like he joined LinkedIn's team early and kind of got to experience that growth. Like the same thing can happen at a startup where you kind of grow with the company, and obviously the company is also growing off of your work as well. And so you want to kind of find those positions where you can kind of mutually benefit the company, and the company is like, all the better for having you as well. And typically I think at a larger company, it is like you want to find these greenfield new teams where you can kind of join early and kind of experience growth as you go. And obviously that depends on your risk tolerance as an individual. If you are looking for something more stable, there are probably other opportunities. But if you're young, you're looking to kind of begin your career, I think like starting with something new always kind of gives you room to kind of shoot for the stars in a sense. And obviously a startup has that kind of built in automatically. But I think you can do the same thing at a large company and still, have compensation like that kind of matches like, some of the highest levels in the industry. I think, and just to speak on compensation here, I think at a startup, when you look at compensation, you're basically kind of adjusting for the uncertainty of it over the next few years. And basically your compensation, your wealth at a startup is going to come from the stock that you get and like the growth of the stock that you get. And the same thing is true for large companies as well as they get larger, but it's not going to be to the magnitude of like you joining at a startup where your equity might 1,000x potentially in value. And so I think that's like sort of some of the trade-offs that you make between large companies and smaller companies. But I do think like, you get a lot more kind of autonomy in like smaller teams, smaller companies. So I do want to make sure like people understand that you can still have the same effect at a larger company in a sense, if you can find these opportunities and teams that would be good for your growth. And it's almost like, in a sense, it's almost like all the benefits of, a startup with the pay at a kind of large company to be able to find those teams. So yeah, and I definitely think, Zaheer is a really prime example of that himself. But yeah, I think that's like a decent summary of my thoughts. But
Nice. Well, what better place to end on than optimize for growth? I think that's good advice for career, good advice for life. I'm really glad we ended on that note. So yeah. Thank you both for being here. Want to ask real quick before we're completely wrap up. Where can folks find you if they want to get in touch with you? And then I'll ask one more question to everybody in the audience as well. But yeah, I'm interested to hear, you know, and if people want to reach out, ask you product questions, maybe even career advice, if you'd be open to it. You got 100 people in here over 100 people who are attending, and you know, this video will be sent out to a lot more than that. Might be interested in getting in touch with you.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
just for you know, product and things about Levels.fyi, we have an email like hello@levels.fyi, and we try to reply to everybody usually. So if you just send us an email there, we will probably get back to you. And outside of that, like me and Zaheer are both like, you know, try to be somewhat active on LinkedIn. We can drop our links as well. And I'm personally, I'm on Twitter as well at my first name at Zaheer. Yeah, and those are some of the ways you can find us.
Yeah, and definitely open to answering questions of, you know, career, or we'll do our best to try to answer them. But we are available online, and you know, there's also a little chat widget on the website. So if you're ever on the website and see something wrong, or if you have any feedback or anything, definitely drop a note in there. It's not robots. We actually do look at those and answer those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Always nice to get in touch with a human.
Yeah, definitely.
It's rare these days. All right. Well, thank you both again so much. For everybody else who's still here, obviously, if you want to learn more about Levels.fyi, there's no better place to go than the website. If the founders here weren't enough for you, you got their contact info, so you can hit them up with the information there. And if you'd like to learn more information about Outco, again, helping you through this tough time, helping you through the interview process, career navigation, overcoming your personal hurdles, whatever it might be. I'm going to launch a poll here. We have free info sessions. You can sign up for one of those and just mark in the poll which one you might be interested in. And Zaheer is sharing their LinkedIn in the chat there. So if anybody wants to hit up Zaheer or Zuhayeer on LinkedIn, there they are. They're there for you, and connect with some founders of a really great product. Yeah. So any parting advice, any final words for folks here as we go back into probably 5 feet from wherever we're at right now?
Parting advice that I would have is just, if you're looking for a job, I know most people on here are looking for a job. I mean, keep your head up. This will come to an end, like everything. You know, COVID-19 will end at some point, and when that happens, you know, and let's say you don't have a job yet, definitely be prepared. You know, touch up your resume, your LinkedIn, and something I shared on a LinkedIn post actually the other day. A lot of folks that are looking for internships, you know, and had their internships canceled. If you don't have work right now, you know, try to create your own opportunities too. You know, the best opportunity, one of the best internships that I had was working on an iPhone app that kind of blew up and became popular. And that was as a result of me not having an internship. And so if you don't have some opportunity right now, see if you can create your own opportunity, and who knows, you know, it might blow up and you might be creating opportunities for other people. So
yeah, definitely want to echo that. Like, you know, if you're kind of in a stalemate position right now, you can do things on your own. You know, like one kind of interesting question that, you know, might be like fun to entertain is like, you know, if I had the next 48 hours to make $10 on the internet, like what could you do potentially? And maybe, you know, try to make some revenue of your own through like a project or something. It's always kind of like a fun exercise, brushes you up on coding a little bit and kind of gets you prepared, and, you know, lets you have a little bit of fun as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. Build and optimize for growth. 2 takeaways. All right.
Awesome.
Well, thank you both so much again. Thank you, everybody, all 88 folks out there. I saw some folks uh, thanking in the chat, so really appreciate that you all were here with us today. And Zuhayeer, really grateful for your time as well, especially during this stressful time to take time out of your busy work days while you're what's it called, riding the dragon's tail of a startup. It can be stressful to take any time away, so really appreciate it.
Yeah, no,
Really
appreciate you,
being
Dan,
here.
for having us on.
Yeah, thanks again for hosting us.
Yeah, and this was all put on, by the way, by my teammate Richie. Really grateful for Richie to be putting this together. It was his idea to put together an Outco podcast. So this is all thanks to Richie, is really what it comes down to.
Yeah,
And
shout out
he got in
Richie.
touch with you both, as I understand it, and put this whole thing together. So really grateful for you, Richie, to put this together.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Richie.
All right, cool. Well, please, Zuhair and Zaheer, check out the chat. You got a lot of thanks coming out. Really grateful for everybody. And
Awesome.
otherwise, have a good night. Take care. Be safe.
Awesome. See you guys. Thanks.
Thank you.